Hey, how you doing, everybody? It's me, Waddles. I hope you're ready to get creaky. The Creaking is Minecraft's newest, baddest, most ferocious man of all. Over the course of today's video, we'll be talking about secret mechanics, strategies to beat it, uses, and even more. Tap that like button and settle in, because this right here is everything you need to know about the Creaking. Location, why does it always start with it? In order to find the Creaking, you're going to need to first locate a very specific biome, the Pale Garden biome. Now keep your eyes peeled on the channel, because I've already dropped a resin guide for this update, hopefully coming very soon as I make it soon. There will be a more in-depth guide on the entire brand new biome itself. Long story short, the Pale Garden biome, as I'm sure you might have heard by now, is a biome variant of the Dark Oak Forest biome. That means in your world, look for a Dark Oak Forest biome and cross your fingers that you've gotten a little bit lucky. And the big puzzle that is Minecraft biomes, the Dark Oak Forest biome and the Pale Garden biome by tangent, well, they're going to be both humid biomes that tend to generate near birch forest biomes and the jungle. But for us today, finding the biome is only half of the battle, because as soon as you locate a pale forest biome, pale garden, whatever, well, as soon as you find this place, running around it in the daytime, and not only is it like dead silent, it's so eerie here, it's all paled out, but also you're gonna find literally nothing, like no passive mobs, but especially not the creaking. Instead, if we want to find this guy, we need to camp out until night. And wow, would you look at that, the timing couldn't be any better. A little bit of time later, in the dead of night, sliding into the Pale Garden biome, you need to be careful. From time to time, inside of this biome, the flowers will try and trick you. While navigating this biome in the dead of nighttime, you need to listen to the sound design here, because it's gonna come into play big time. We'll watch it, buddy. That's just a spider. Yeah, okay. While wandering through this biome, eventually, you're bound to find one, a creaking. Look at this guy right here. Now, as soon as you find one of these things and get close enough to it, it'll lock onto you. The big tell that you're in trouble here is the eyes and the motion voice, but the eyes, they're this like bright orange glow, and it doesn't move at all, or at least it won't move at all when you're looking at it. While you don't look at it, the creaking actually moves insanely quickly and will deal quite a bit of damage to you. It's very dangerous. If I try and say like take this guy out the good old-fashioned way, well, instead, when I hit the creaking, as you know from the resin episode, a little bit of particles pop up, leading us back over to its source, a creaking heart block. Watch it, buddy. Hey, but hold up, rewind. How in the world did we get here? In a short term, the Creaking, this terrible brand new baddie, was added to Minecraft first in Snapshot 24W48, about a week after being shown off at Minecraft Live 2024. Now, we don't technically know exactly what Mojang had in mind when creating the Creaking, but the Creaking mechanically, oh boy, it seems so similar to the Weeping Angel mod, one of the most classic, iconic Minecraft mods of the golden era. The concept with the Weeping Angel right here is pretty straightforward. If I'm looking at the Weeping Angel, it doesn't move. But if I look away from the Weeping Angel, all of a sudden it comes to life and chases me. And oh my gosh, how that thing moves around is so terrifying. Like, almost creepier than the Creaking. The Weeping Angel, this little thing, is great. Now I'm in the aether. It's all pretty cool, really. Smash that like button for a full showcase of the Weeping Angel later. And channel members, this world that we're using today, great news, world download out for you right now. Tap that join button to directly support me and for a little bit more information, the Creaking. Once I find this guy inside the biome only at nighttime, if I hit it, the particles will link into the Creaking heart source, Creaking heart block. Now, I'm gonna need to, once I find this thing, keep my eyes on it at all times. That is going to include going around the corner of a block. I mean, that line of sight is unobstructed, which means this guy gets a free range of movement again. It's so terrifying. Now, if you're maybe done with this guy, go ahead and cut to the chase, then start cutting down the pale oak tree, hopefully before the other mobs find you in this biome. They're all over the place. Find that Creaking heart block. It's usually buried inside of the tree. And check this out. As soon as you break the Creaking heart block, one of the coolest animations in the entire game plays, and the Creaking is gone. You've done it. You beat the creak. So those are your basics, but really, the Creaking, it's such a unique mob. There's nothing in the game like it. Game mechanics. For starters, the spawning of this mob, because at nighttime, like most other hostile mobs, it'll pop up into the world. But this thing's number one weakness is kind of the sun, because during the daytime, even if you have a Creaking heart placed down into the ideal conditions for a Creaking to spawn, well, it will never spawn. You could think of the Creaking sort of as this RuneScape-esque tree-ent thing that is also just like the Phantom, only manifesting at nighttime. Now, the only way to find a Creaking or get one to spawn is going to be the creaking heart block. However, if I just place this block down as is, nothing's gonna happen. If I actually want to get the creaking to spawn, then I'm gonna need to sandwich the creaking heart block in between two pale oak logs. Now, there are multiple ways that you can do this. This is a rotational block, so you could have it going like long ways like that, or up and down vertically like that. In order to summon a creaking, you'll know that you've got your creaking heart placement down if the creaking heart block is illuminated with the strange orange glow that emits from the creaking as well. But after that, after you've got your creaking heart locked in, it's a waiting game. Wait around till nighttime and best sees its go time. The creaking will manifest itself somewhere within a 16 block radius, 8 blocks vertically of its source creaking heart block. So essentially what that all means here is 8 blocks that could be up or down, above or below the creaking heart, and then a 16 block radius. I mean, that's 16 blocks straight out right there. Draw a circle all the way around it, and you've got the spawning radius of the creaking. Now, when the creaking spawns into your world, assuming you are not like standing immediately right next to it, it'll actually just low-key be chill and idle around like nothing's going on at all. Also, it should be noted real quick that the creaking does not care about players in spectator mode or creative mode. Me walking around right now is the same as me just not even being by the creaking at all. However, check this guy out, because as soon as I flip into survival mode, the eyes, they illuminate, they light up, and the movement, it freezes literally exactly in place. Like, its head won't even turn anymore or anything like that. Instead, like we found in pure survival earlier, if I want to see this guy move, then I need to look away from it. And as soon as I look away from it, it comes to life. And look at how quickly this thing runs. The running and movement animation too, it's so twitchy and scary and just like terrifying. Now the creaking, it's a dangerous mob depending on the difficulty that you have set. Easy difficulty, 2 damage per hit. Normal difficulty, well, that'll scale up a half a heart more to 3 points of damage. And hard difficulty, that is 2 hearts, full hearts of damage every single time this hits you, assuming you don't have any armor on at all. The creaking is so dangerous and terrifying. That's why you want to look at the creaking at every single second of the day. However, looking at the creaking, it actually is kind of relative to the default FOV. You see right now, if I'm looking at the creaking, it's not going to move. If I look away, as soon as it slides off of the screen with default FOV, it'll be able to move again. But that's default FOV. Not everyone plays with it. With smaller, I mean, it's smaller. But with a larger FOV, maybe you're thinking you could cheese the creaking and, you know, just like be able to look really wide and it'll never chase you. Well, no, that's not the case here. The creaking's detection, watching, movement radius thing, well, this chill guy right here, it assumes you're using a default FOV of 70. But let's go back to a situation where the creaking hasn't locked on to me quite yet. Let's also go to a situation where we're in the dead of night, but we have a little bit of night vision. While the creaking is idle, this thing will fully wander around. It will not willingly walk over empty blocks that has normal mob pathfinding. However, you could theoretically trick it with an open trapdoor if you wanted to. But while it's wandering, the creaking will wander relatively close to the creaking heart block. While the creaking is locked on to a player, it can only chase you so far. That amount, the distance that the creaking will be able to hunt you, it's a 32 block Euclidean radius around its source creaking heart block. So in simple terms, Euclidean radius, that's going to mean find the creaking heart source block, count to 32 blocks out in a straight line, then draw that into a big circle like I've done right here, and that's how far the creaking will be able to move. Anything beyond it, and it literally cannot. The creaking also isn't going to lock onto a player in survival Minecraft until that player in survival Minecraft gets close enough to it. While I'm in survival but nowhere near it, it'll, in the meantime, just kind of wander around and do its own thing. Anyways, the 32 block radius here, check this out. So on this side over here, if I go ahead and run away from the creaking and never look at it, well, I'm still not looking at the creaking, but 32 blocks has hit its limit, so it knows that it can't go any farther and do anything. And actually, if I walk up to the creaking and try and like touch it right now while looking at it, as long as I'm looking at it, not walking right through it, it won't do anything to me. I also cannot like push the creaking or move it or anything like that. I can't push or move it, but there are some other things that can push or move it. And check out what happens if the creaking moves beyond the 32 block radius. If I dump a little bit of water, buddy will start to flow away. If I go ahead and get rid of that water, 32 blocks away, more than 32 blocks, and it just demanifested. It goes away and pops back in at the starting point. But water, that's interesting. So water right here, the creaking, it can kind of swim and float in water. It can't really move against current very well. But in survival, if you wanted to say control the creaking and move it around somehow without risking your own life, you could use a little bit of water, dump it, and just kind of like move the creaking around with the flows of life. However, in survival, one thing that isn't going to work, you might think this thing is like kind of half a tree, right? At least half, maybe? So maybe fire is not good for it? No, it doesn't care about fire at all. Lava, completely immune to it. Maybe like a little bit of proper normal fire? Yeah, also completely immune to it as well. It doesn't do anything. You might get really clever with it and say, hey, what about maybe I say just explode the creaking? No big deal. I'll light a little bit of explosives and blow it up. Well, no, blowing it up, it doesn't even actually, like, send it knocked back. While we're at it here, a couple other things you cannot do with the creaking. A boat, it will never fit in a boat. A lead, it will never go on a leash. And a name tag, hey, wait, that's a beautiful name. That reminds me to remind you to tap that like button and subscribe for more cool updates and guides, information. Your brain will be swelling if you do it, but yeah, unfortunately, you can't put the name tag on the creaking either. Now, let's actually go ahead and rewind things back for a second here, talking about spawning. The creaking, it'll spawn in around the creaking heart in that radius that we mentioned earlier. What blocks will it spawn in on, though? Because for the creaking, at least seemingly right now, it's a little bit different when compared to other mobs. When it comes to blocks that are bright blocks, so let's say maybe a frog light, a sea lantern, glowstone, or even areas with torches, well, the creaking, it has no care about light level at all. As long as it's nighttime and a player is relatively close to the creaking heart block, it'll spawn. Also, other strange, weird blocks like glass, it seems right now, doesn't really fully make sense to me, and I feel like this might be something that ends up getting changed a little bit later on, but at least right now, the creaking can spawn on glass blocks too. So your traditional non-spawnable blocks, unfortunately, when it comes to the question of spawning, the creaking might be able to spawn on them. However, all hope isn't lost. There are some strange other blocks that are hard-nosed when it comes to the creaking spawning. For example, a block that is not a fully solid block, let's say a staircase, yeah, it's not going to be able to spawn there. Half slabs on the lower half of a block, you know, something like that right there, that's not going to work. And carpet. Carpet is a big one. Carpet is a great way to block creaking spawns. If you say don't want one to spawn or are trying to control its spawn to specific spots in, say, a farm. So for an overload on every creaking mechanic, there we go. Let's talk a little bit more about how to actually beat this thing in survival, though. So for method number 1 here, let's say we had a small trap, a hole in the ground. Keep in mind, this creaking, it's out of the radius, is never going to chase me. Instead, we're going to need to go ahead and get ourselves a different creaking to come into the world. Once we get that creaking to pop itself into the world, over here I've got a small trap. In the small trap, it's a pit in the ground. If I go ahead and walk into this pit in the ground, and, you know, like, don't to look at the creaking, well, sooner or later, hopefully, where'd you go? Eventually, the creaking's in a hole in the ground. If I'm trapped in this hole in the ground with the creaking, and this is where the hitbox comes into play here, the creaking's hitbox is kind of large. Well, the creaking, this one is kind of tricky to show off, but if the creaking is trapped in a hole with the player for more than 8 seconds, just like that right there, it'll just simply despawn. This is because the creaking's hitbox, it's kind of large. If you're trapped in a full solid block with the creaking and you can't, like, say, harm the creaking, you could essentially be soft locked into a single spot in the game. Like we talked about earlier, another great way to beat the creaking is simply move the creaking a little bit too far away from its source creaking heart block. A little bit of water, as soon as it gets a little bit too far away, it'll just demanifest. The main method to beat the creaking, the one you'll probably be pulling off all the time inside of this update, is simply break its source creaking heart block. You can't deal any damage to the creaking unless you break the creaking heart. As soon as you do that, the thing will twitch a little bit, the eyes blink, and it's gone, like it never was real. And last but not least here, your other option is to simply wait until daytime. Only catch here is this bed right here, that's not gonna work. He's a monster, I can't sleep in it. But as soon as daytime rolls around, the creaking, it'll simply just break apart and go away. So that's how to beat the creaking, but maybe you're not trying to just beat the living life out of this thing. Instead, you want to deal with it. Well, here are some tips. 1, it's all about the good armor, baby. If you can get your hands on some decent armor or maybe even good armor, the creaking doesn't really become much of a threat at all. Like, check this out right here. Here I am, fully suited up, unenchanted diamond. Let's say I had a creaking right here, and I look away from the creaking. 1 tap of the creaking, and I mean, it didn't even register on the heart bar right there. Like, it's not bad at all. Oh, what's that? That's because that was a fake creaking? Well, yes, but actually, no. The creaking, I mean, you know, if you let the guy hit you long enough, eventually your saturation's gonna go down and the damage is gonna start showing. But really, I mean, good armor here, and you're essentially immune to this little buddy. And of course, obviously, keep in mind that unenchanted diamonds, I mean, come on, you could do a whole lot better. Your next option here, I mean, oh, it's so sweet. It's gonna deal with the goodest boy in the world. So dogs, just because of how good they are, they kind of already had a little bit of a superpower, but the star of the show, Bonzo, my boy's gonna help me out here. So let's say we had a creaking inside of my world over here, and maybe that creaking didn't really like me. I've got my pet dog, I've got a creaking right here. If I go ahead and hit the creaking, then the dog is gonna kind of know, like, hey, you want me to attack that thing, and it'll keep attacking it. The creaking will never hurt the dog. Now, the dog really fighting the creaking, I mean, it doesn't necessarily stop it. It's much quicker than a dog, but maybe you could at least have, like, your guard doggo here, like, automatically attacking it and smacking it. What, you're gonna tell me you're giving the dog an E for effort? Come on, man, it's adorable. It just wants to help you. It's nice. Another great option here, instead of using the dog, is maybe just a little bit of water. Now, to be honest, maybe the best option is to literally just look at the creaking, but if you're standing in flowing water and not looking at the creaking, I mean, it will never be able to get you. It'll kind of frantically run around the side of the water trying to get closer, but it won't be able to do anything to you at all. Like, it can't figure out the water current. And last but not least for today, a great way to deal with the creaking is while looking at the creaking, you can actually dig this thing down into a hole, you know, something like this right here. Then I can look away from the creaking, and because I put it in a hole and because I'm not inside of that hole, it will never despawn, at least not until the next daytime. Not only is this an amazing way to deal with the creaking, and it's so easy because it doesn't move while you look at it, but if you want to set up a simple farm, I mean, trapping it in a hole, it's a great idea. And hey, let's go ahead and level it up. Who knows? Maybe even trap it in a hole with your dearest, best dog friend as well. And now look at that thing. I don't even need to look at the creaking, and it's just automatically gonna basically farm resin for me, just like that. Oh, we weren't even gonna talk about that today. And with that, let's segue into uses for the creaking, because use number one is a big one, obviously. A resin farm. Now, resin farms, farming all of the mechanics with resin and everything like that, that's a topic for the resin episode of the Everything series. And when you take a look at that, that episode is actually already out. Is that a chicken jockey? Oh my god, a baby one. That's crazy. So, if you want to know a little bit more about that specific use for the creaking, then check out that episode next after this one. This is probably, to be honest, the single best use for the creaking in all of Minecraft. Redstone. The creaking has an interesting behavior when it comes to water. The creaking, it wants to float, but it also wants to sink as well. You see, if I'm looking at the creaking right here, I mean, it's going to sink down to the bottom. But if I look away from the creaking, it'll start to float a little bit. If I were able to trap a creaking into a single block of water, well, you might be able to find an interesting use for the creaking, like a strange machine or something where it actually toggles things on and off. Or, if you're really clever, you want to make the safest base in the world, well, you might be able to use the creaking for a little bit of a base of proofing and base of protection, because take a look at this, sliding into some secret mechanics of the creaking here. The creaking, as long as it's within 8 blocks of an illager, the illager runs away and is terrified of this thing. That means you can strategically post these things up all around your base and maybe say a pillager patrol. I mean, it's never really going to be much of a problem again, because if they see a creaking and they turn around and say, never mind, let me get out of here. Look at that thing. That mechanic is so cool. But what about Johnny? What does Johnny think about all of this? If you name tag a pillager Johnny, then inherently it's going to want to attack everything, right? Well, yes, but actually no. So its AI here kind of is torn. If we watch this guy from time to time, well, it'll wake up from time to time and say, hey, that's a creaking. I want to take it out, and it'll run towards it and then say, oh, wait, never mind. That's a creaking. It remembers it doesn't want to be anywhere near the creaking at all. Like, what was it ever thinking? A little secret move. Are you looking to deal with the hardest version of the creaking possible? Well, put a carved pumpkin on your head, and the creaking, I mean, it's gonna act like you're never looking at it. It's kind of like a reverse of the whole Enderman thing. The creaking, it doesn't matter if I'm staring at it. It will still just try and continue in charge and attack me. This is kind of an interesting way that you could observe the creaking, especially if you remove your HUD, like you tap F1 and, you know, just hide it away. Then you can see the creaking in all of its movement in like plain sight view. And the last things last today, did you know that there are not one, but 2 different types of creaking in the game? You have the one that comes from the creaking heart block, like if you hit it, it does the resin particles and everything like that. And then you have the creative creaking that is going to like behaviorally behave mostly the same. But more importantly, the creative mode creaking, I mean, it wanders around. If I'm in survival, it locks on. If I look away, it wants to chase me, whatever. But because it doesn't have a source creaking heart block, if I punch it once, it's just done. And so the creaking. That right there is just about everything you need to know about this bad baddie for the new Minecraft update. One Creaking Vs Warden, who in the world would win? Bro, you're making too much vibrations. Well, it literally doesn't matter because, I mean, it kind of does, right? You push him out of the radius, he's gone. But at the same time, it can always just come, like, right back to life. Does the Warden really win it all? I don't really think it does. If you know anything else secret or cool, tell me about it down below. You've got a question, ask me about it down below. It's been me, Waddles. Channel members, I've got a world download out right now for you of this little setup. On the end card of the Everything Series playlist, check it out, tap that like button, subscribe. It's been me, Waddles, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.